She clinked her glass and smiled at me across the table. "Some of us raised families with a father," she said. Everyone laughed. Even my son looked down. I just sat there, my daughter's hand in mine. I'd been called worse. Forgotten more. But when dessert came, my little girl stood up, climbed onto her chair, and said 9 words that made the whole room stop breathing. It was the kind of silence that settles only when something irreversible has been said. Forks froze mid-air. A spoon clattered on a plate. Even the background music, once cheerful and low, now felt too loud for the moment. I didn't look around. I looked at her. My daughter. 7 years old, in the yellow dress she picked herself, one sock slightly rolled down, chin lifted like she was made of steel and honey. The engagement party was for my ex-brother-in-law and his new fiancée, a woman so polished she might have been chiseled from marble and compliments. The table was filled with people who had always found a reason to make me feel less. Less wife, less mother, less enough. The seating chart told its own story. I had been squeezed next to the ice bucket, behind a decorative column, beside the kids' table. They didn't even pretend I was meant to be seen. Earlier when I arrived, my son, my firstborn, my cautious boy, had hugged me like a neighbor. Quick, stiff, polite. "Glad you could come," he said, like I hadn't raised him through 2 jobs and a broken spine of grief. He didn't notice the dress I wore, the one I bought second-hand and hemmed myself, or the curls my daughter helped pin in place that morning. Maybe it didn't matter. Maybe it never had. Dinner was some overpriced version of what I used to cook on Sundays. Rosemary chicken, wild rice, too much garnish. I chewed quietly. My daughter leaned on me, tired of the fake smiles and the strange adults. She whispered, "Do we get cake?" And I said, "Only if it doesn't cost extra." She giggled into my sleeve. The toast came after the second course. That's when it happened. His sister, my former sister-in-law, lifted her champagne flute and turned to me with that thin smile she'd always worn like a weapon. "Some of us raised families with a father." The way she said it, like it was a punchline. Like her husband hadn't cheated 3 times before she looked the other way. I glanced at my son. His fork paused. His eyes didn't meet mine. I could have spoken. Could have reminded them that I raised a child alone while their brother skipped town with his new soulmate. Could have listed every fever I broke without help, every tuition fee I paid late but paid still. But what would have been the point? The room wasn't listening. It was performing. And I wasn't cast in tonight's show. My daughter squeezed my hand. I squeezed back. I told her once, long ago, that silence doesn't mean weakness. It means watching, waiting, choosing your moment. She remembered. And so, she stood. There was a murmur as she climbed onto her chair. Someone chuckled. "Oh no, a speech," someone else muttered. But her voice cut through the room like a lit match in a dark room. I didn't know what she was going to say. And that terrified me more than anything. I remembered earlier that morning, when she disappeared into her room with construction paper and a glue stick. "Can I bring something to the party?" she asked. I thought it was a drawing. Maybe a card. I never imagined she'd planned something. Now, with the attention of an entire room, adults who had dismissed her like they dismissed me, she was about to speak. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. I wanted to stop her, shield her. But she had already stepped forward, her tiny hands at her sides, eyes scanning faces she didn't fear. "My name is Nora," she said. "I'm 7. And I just wanted to say thank you." Thank you. There was a shift in the air. Confusion. Politeness returning to the faces of people who didn't want to look too guilty. My former sister-in-law leaned back in her seat, smirking again. "How sweet," she whispered to someone. But Nora wasn't finished. "Thank you," she repeated, louder now, "to the people at my school who nominated my mom. And the people who gave me this envelope. Envelope. She pulled it from her tiny purse. A white rectangle with gold trim. Everyone leaned in. I felt a tightness rise in my chest. The envelope was real. And I had no idea what was inside it. But before she opened it, before she read the words that would change the room forever, she looked at me and smiled. And I knew. I knew that whatever came next wasn't for them. It was for me. And then the double doors opened. Behind the servers wheeling in cake, a man entered. Tall, in a charcoal suit, scanning the room with purpose. Not a guest. Not a relative. But he walked straight toward me. Straight toward my daughter. And in his hand, he held a second envelope. And just like that, I realized, my daughter hadn't come here to thank anyone. She came to deliver something. Something final. I never meant to raise her alone. That was never the dream. When I held my son for the first time, years before Nora was even a thought in the back of my mind, I imagined a house with laughter, with warmth, with holidays where nobody left early. But life, real life, has a way of hollowing out your fantasies. My son's father left slowly. First, emotionally. Then physically. By the time I told him I was pregnant again, he was already slipping through cracks he'd widened himself. He said he wasn't ready for another child. I told him I wasn't asking for permission. I raised both of them. One in the shadow of a man who never looked back, the other in the light of the woman I was becoming. There were no congratulations when I announced I'd be a mother again. Not from family. Not from neighbors. My own mother asked if I planned to burden the world with another mistake. My sister said, "You can't even afford the one you have." And still, I did it. I worked nights at the diner, poured coffee for people who didn't look up, smiled through bone-deep exhaustion. Then, in the mornings, I wrapped sandwiches in wax paper, brushed little teeth, and packed backpacks. I attended every parent-teacher meeting even when I was too tired to speak. My name was on every volunteer list, though no one ever remembered to thank me. I stitched costumes for school plays while my hands trembled from fatigue. I gave everything. Quietly. Always quietly. People like to call it strength. But it didn't feel like strength. It felt like survival. A long, slow stretch of holding your breath and hoping no one sees you crack. I didn't have time for rage. I had Nora. She was curious, gentle, fierce in ways I didn't teach but recognized. She noticed everything. When the fridge was nearly empty. When her brother forgot her birthday. When her aunt, my ex's sister, sent a group gift from the family that excluded my name. She noticed how I smiled through it. How I folded the sting into the laundry, into the dishes, into bedtime stories. "Why don't you get mad?" she once asked. I told her that some battles are won in silence. She didn't understand then. Maybe not fully. But she filed it away. My son began slipping from me slowly. I couldn't even blame him. He spent more weekends at his father's house. Came back quieter each time. One day, he corrected the way I pronounced a word, said that's not how Dad said it. I laughed. He didn't. He told me, with a seriousness too old for his face, that his father's family was more normal. I nodded. Let it go. What else could I do? I didn't have wealth or status. All I had was the truth, and the truth rarely wins loud arguments. The day I found out about the school nomination, I cried in the hallway before anyone saw. Nora had told her teacher I was her hero, that I helped kids with reading after school, that I fixed backpacks with broken zippers, and always brought extra snacks in case someone forgot theirs. I didn't know the teacher had submitted my name to the board for a small local honor, nothing glamorous. Just a recognition given to a parent or guardian who made a quiet difference. But it felt like the first time someone saw me without looking past me. A few weeks later, I received a call from the district office. They said a foundation, one I'd never heard of, was starting a pilot scholarship program. Nora's essay had been selected. They'd read what she wrote about me. They wanted to name the first award after her words. For children of strong women. I almost dropped the phone. The letter arrived days later. I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. Not because I wanted to surprise them, but because I wasn't sure anyone would care. That's when Nora started making plans. I didn't know what she was doing with her drawings, or why she asked to bring her own little purse to the party. I thought she was just being her usual dreamy self, trying to add sparkle to something dull. She kept saying, "It'll be a good day, Mama. You'll see." I smiled, but in the back of my mind, I braced for impact. These events always bruised. I wore armor no one could see. The worst part was the repetition. The predictability of being forgotten. Every event, every gathering, was like a play I'd already memorized. My role a footnote. They never missed a chance to remind me who didn't belong. I wasn't one of them. I didn't marry into money. I didn't have the pedigree. I was the girl who got left, the mother who wouldn't go away, the guest no one asked for but felt obligated to tolerate. It's a strange thing, to sit in rooms with people who think you're lucky to be there, when it's your own blood that built the walls. Still, I came. I dressed up. I brought a thoughtful gift, handmade with care, because I couldn't afford the registry items. I helped clean up without being asked. My daughter and I always stayed until the end and left with nothing but crumbs and plastic cups. But this time, she had a plan. I didn't know what it was. I just knew she was waiting for something. And now I wonder if she'd been waiting longer than I thought. Watching longer. Preparing longer. I didn't think the moment would come with an envelope. I didn't think it would come with a man in a charcoal suit, walking toward us with purpose. But there he was. And Nora smiled like she'd been expecting him all along. And that was the moment I realized. This wasn't just about her standing up for me. This was her delivering something I had never dared to ask for. Proof. Not of my pain, but of my power. The man in the charcoal suit walked through the crowd like he belonged there, but no one knew him. Not the groom, not the bride, not my ex, not even my son. But Nora looked up at him like they'd met before, like she trusted him. He stopped in front of her chair, handed her a second envelope, then turned to me. "Ms. Evelyn Carter?" he asked. His voice was quiet, professional, but carried easily through the stunned silence. I nodded slowly, heart pounding. My office was asked to deliver this on behalf of the Board of Education and the Harlow Foundation. I blinked. I'd heard of the foundation. Barely. Just a name on newsletters and plaques in school hallways. He stepped back with a nod. "Congratulations." No one moved. Not even my son, who now looked like he'd forgotten how to breathe. Nora held up both envelopes and turned to the table. I wanted to read something. And somehow, no one dared stop her. She opened the first envelope, the one she had brought, and pulled out a folded sheet of paper with crayon marks along the edges. I recognized it. It was her letter. The one I never knew she sent. She took a deep breath and began. "My name is Nora Carter. I'm in 2nd grade. I want to tell you about my mom. My mom makes pancakes in funny shapes. She works all the time but still helps me with math. She taught me how to spell courage." When I told her I was scared to read in front of the class, she said courage is being scared and doing it anyway. Her voice wavered a little, but she didn't stop. She says we don't need a lot of things to be important. We just need to show up, help others, and be kind even when it hurts. That's why I think my mom is a hero. That's why I think she deserves everything. There wasn't a sound in the room except for the ice melting in half-empty glasses. Her little voice had carved through the noise, through every insult and smirk I had swallowed for years. She reached into the second envelope and held up an official certificate, golden seal catching the chandelier light. "This says I won a scholarship," she said. "But I don't think I won it. I think my mom did." She paused, eyes flicking to the woman who had made the father comment. "And I'm really lucky. Because my family has a father. And a mother. And she's both." Something broke. Not loudly. Not with screams. But I saw it in the expressions. The curled lips of fake smiles straightening. The way someone at the end of the table lowered their phone, embarrassed to have filmed any of it. The way my son sat straighter, as if remembering something he'd tried hard to forget. My ex's fiancée looked uncomfortable for the first time that evening, her hand tightening around her wine glass. And his sister, who had delivered her jab like a joke carved from judgment, looked like she wanted to melt into her chair. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. My chest felt too full. Nora sat down gently after folding the papers and placing them in my lap like she'd handed me the crown I never asked for. I looked at her. Her cheeks were flushed. But her eyes were calm. Like she knew exactly what she'd done. It wasn't dramatic. No one flipped a table. No one apologized. But the air had shifted. The weight in the room had changed hands. And suddenly, the woman seated behind the kitchen door didn't feel small anymore. I looked up to see my son staring at me. His face unreadable. He started to stand, then sat back down, as if unsure if he had the right. I stood slowly, tucked the envelope under my arm, smoothed my dress, the one no one had complimented. I didn't need compliments anymore. I took Nora's hand. She rose beside me, still holding her little purse like a queen's scepter. We turned to leave. "Mom, wait," my son said, barely a whisper. I stopped. Not for him. For myself. I turned slightly, met his eyes. He looked young again. Like the boy who used to bring me dandelions from the yard. "I didn't know," he said. That's all he offered. And that's all I needed to hear. Not because it was enough. But because it proved he'd been watching too. I nodded once. "Take care of her," I said softly, motioning toward the new bride beside him. "Make sure she never feels invisible." Then I turned again and walked toward the exit, my daughter's fingers wrapped tightly around mine. The music hadn't started back up. The dessert was untouched. And as we passed the table where the toast had begun, someone whispered, "Did she know this would happen?" I didn't look back. I just smiled to myself. Because the truth was, I didn't. But Nora did. And she had planned every quiet second of it. We didn't go back. Not to the party. Not to the house. Not to any version of life where I was expected to smile through silence. That night, after we left, I drove with the windows down and let the wind tangle my daughter's hair as she hummed her favorite song. We stopped for ice cream. Chocolate with rainbow sprinkles. Her request. She asked if I was proud of her, and I laughed so softly it almost broke. I told her she didn't need to prove anything to me. But still I was proud. I had never been more proud in my life. Not because she made them quiet, but because she saw me. And she chose the truth over comfort. The next morning, the messages started. Missed calls. Texts from numbers I hadn't saved but remembered too well. A photo from the event group chat showed Nora standing on her chair, eyes glowing, certificate in hand. My ex's fiancé had commented with a heart emoji. I almost laughed. The same woman who couldn't remember Nora's name at Christmas now wanted to share her spotlight. His sister texted me 2 words. "I'm sorry." I stared at it for a full minute before deleting it. Not because I was angry, but because the apology had nowhere to land. I had already moved on. My son emailed me a week later. He asked if we could talk. Said he'd been wrong. Said he hadn't understood what it meant to be raised by someone who carried everything. I didn't write back. Not then. Some things need time. Not to forgive, but to settle into truth. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want a reckoning. I just wanted peace. For the first time in years, it felt like I had it. Our home was small, a little uneven, windows drafty when the wind turned. But it was ours. I planted herbs by the kitchen window. Nora painted stars on her ceiling. We cooked together. Read together. Sometimes, we danced in the kitchen with the music too loud and socks too slippery. I'd catch her smiling at me the way children do when they know a secret they're proud to keep. One day, she asked if I still had the letter. I told her yes. I kept it in a wooden box next to old photos and birthday cards. She nodded like she understood why. She did. The shoebox she once used for drawings and stickers had a new label on it now. She wrote it herself in blue marker. Things that matter. Inside, she placed the envelope with the scholarship letter, a pressed flower from the garden we planted after that night, and the drawing she made of me, cape and all. I didn't ask her to do it. She just knew. People kept reaching out. An aunt who once said I brought it on myself, called and left a voicemail asking if we could meet for coffee. I never returned it. I wasn't bitter. I was done. There's a difference. My quiet had always been mistaken for weakness. But silence isn't the absence of power. It's the holding of it. The choosing of when and where to let it speak. That night at the party, it had spoken through a child. Through clarity. Through love. I used to keep reminders of the pain. Old texts. Cancelled invitations. Photos where I'd been cropped out. I don't anymore. They don't serve me. What I do keep is one thing. The place card from the party. It had my name spelled wrong. Folded unevenly. It was meant to be discarded. But I kept it. Not as a wound. But as a marker. A line drawn between the woman I was expected to be and the one I chose to become. Nora asked me once if we'd ever be invited to another family gathering. I told her maybe. Or maybe not. Either way, it didn't matter. We had built something no one could take back. Not a reputation. Not a legacy. Just truth. Just each other. Spring came early that year. The flowers bloomed wild in our little yard, growing through cracks in the concrete, defiant and bright. Nora painted a sign for the front gate. It read, "Strong women live here." She added a sun in the corner and hung it with string and clothespins. I didn't change a thing. I still walk past my phone sometimes and see the missed calls. The invitations. The cautious messages trying to rewrite old stories. I don't erase them. I just let them sit. Like ghosts. Like echoes. And every time I wonder if I should answer, I look at Nora. The way she reads on the porch with her legs tucked beneath her. The way she hums when she's brushing her hair. The way she once stood on a chair and said what I had carried in silence for years. They said I didn't belong. I said goodbye. And I never looked back.